Welcome back for part 2 of a special two-parter game collection video. Last time was part 1 of limited run games, which was strictly Nintendo stuff. This time is going to be strictly Sony stuff from limited run. But very first thing here is my only game from strictly limited, which this is definitely designed like classic arcade games of the 80s, which I actually really appreciate. As you see, there are 3 game modes, boss fights, weapon upgrades, and everything. This was the 13th in the series. 13th game, or game copy number 1115. But that is it for that. Next up, let's get first to the non-PS4 stuff. We have a total of 3 Vita games to look at. First up, The Bit Trip, which is a great, awesome collection of many arcade-style games. A lot of these were on like 3DS and stuff. They're still really fun. Personally, I highly recommend checking out Bit Trip. Also, Oddworld Stranger's Wrath HD, which is getting harder and harder to find now, especially since this is still factory sealed. Do have the game, of course, and absolutely love it, and highly recommend more people check out Oddworld Stranger's Wrath. Also, one of my personal pride and joys of my collection is Papers, Please, which is done by, of course, Lucas Pope, which also did a game called Return of the Obra Dinn. But it is a very unique style game, and this was the only console release ever. Otherwise, it is a PC exclusive. So, if you wanted to play this on a console or something, you had to get this through limited run and strictly on the Vita. Next up is what I have so far on the PS5 front, which is Shantae, Risky's Revenge, Shantae and the Pirate's Curse, Shantae, Half Genie Hero, which is my personal favorite, and Seven Sirens. I am still waiting for the original game to get shipped. But yeah, you can also order a special box to have the complete thing in. And this will be my first ever complete set of Shantae. Next up, we have another classic arcade-style game, which is pretty awesome and I highly recommend checking out. This also included, well, at least the one I got, also included the original soundtrack to the game as well, which is actually really great. And I love the 3D style. You can tell this was inspired by games like Starblade and others of the 5th generation, as well as like Star Fox, were definitely heavy inspirations on this game. It's really cool, and yeah, it was one of the earliest. It was only like the 3rd release for PS4 from limited run. Next up, a game I was lucky to get at least when they had a warehouse clear out sale back a couple of years back, and I'm happy I was able to finally get a physical copy of Celeste. And by the way, the music in the background in this video is the soundtrack from Celeste. Love this game. It's great. It can actually be easy for newcomers to actually try out, as it does have lighter difficulty levels, but then there's also like an expert level of the game. So this game actually can be extremely deep in the mechanics and gameplay aspects, and it has quite a high difficulty curve. So just know that it definitely got a lot of inspiration from games like Mega Man, Mega Man X, as well as like earlier like Super Mario World and many others. You can definitely tell from the like stage designs and everything, its inspiration. But it is a gorgeous looking game. It has a superb soundtrack as well. Next, River City Girls, which, as I've mentioned before many times, this is a great beat 'em up game I recommend for anyone who grew up playing like Streets of Rage as well as Final Fight and also Double Dragon, Ninja Turtles, and many other great beat 'em ups. But this is a great game. I can't recommend this game highly enough, and yeah, it can be a two-player co-op where you play with each character. It's done by WayForward Games, just like the Shantae games. But if you've never tried River City Girls, I do highly recommend it. Also, a remaster of a game I'm frankly surprised they actually did a remaster on. Also, the fact it has a reversible cover that also says Fahrenheit, which was what it was called overseas in Europe and places. Just not here. But this was really the beginnings, and this game was revolutionary for when it originally came out on the PlayStation 2. Which I do, by the way, still have the original game as well. So it is definitely great. I do highly recommend checking this game out. Next up, of course, Streets of Rage 4, which couldn't resist when it originally got released, as the Streets of Rage series is a true all-time classic originally from Sega games. And I recommend it to any beat 'em up fans out there. Or Sega fans. Next up, Shantae and the Seven Sirens. This was the first version of the game I ever played. My first time trying Half Genie Hero was on Xbox One, though. Digitally, though. I got it for free 1 month. This game is not bad, don't get me wrong. It's still a solid game, it's just I feel it was kind of a downgrade from Half Genie Hero. Next up, easily one of the games that I most was looking forward to when I pre-ordered was Outer Wilds. This game is a game I've actually digitally I've gotten twice, and the fact also now it has an expansion, and the game has ended up selling something like, I believe, somewhere around the region of like 4 to 5 million copies in total, at least digitally. And it makes me happy, as this game deserves a lot more love than it actually gets. It's a beautiful game, very interesting concepts. The fact every 22 minutes the sun explodes and then you have to start back. Basically, it's like a Groundhog Day time loop. And that's the best way to describe is compared to Groundhog Day. And by the way, if you've never seen Groundhog Day, watch the movie. Seriously, do yourself a service and check it out. One of the best comedies of all time. Next up, we have a re-release of course, Mark of the Wolves, which was originally released exclusively to the Sega Dreamcast. Superb game on the Dreamcast, great. Though, it was awesome when that they made this actually available a physical version for the remaster. As this is a game, I think, well, plenty of people have already stated the fact, in my opinion, this is probably the best design of Terry in any of the series, and of course also this is the game that really brought onto the stage Rock Howard, son of course, Geese. And a pretty cool character, though I've always been more of a Terry player than a Rock Howard. Next up we have, coming back to Lucas Pope, as I already talked about before, Return of the Obra Dinn. A superb game that deserves way more love than it has gone, though it has definitely quite a cult following, much like Lucas Pope's first game. Both are definitely cult classics. I love the whole black and white structure, design with the animation, the fact that Lucas Pope did the whole game by himself, developed it, music, everything. That is insane to think one person made the whole game. Well, that's why he can afford to take more risks than sadly big companies are willing to risk. Next up is technically a remaster of a classic game, of course, that was on the GameCube. If you're a fan of Adult Swim back in the day, or later on Toonami when it got re-released and stuff, I can't stress enough actually how much enjoyment Samurai Jack is. Yeah, it definitely has some technical issues, but still, as somebody who remembers Samurai Jack back when it first came out, it's great. Arguably, probably the best, like, Cartoon Network original series, at least in my personal perspective, anyways. I love Haku is one of probably my favorite villains of an animated series. And just in general, it's an enjoyable universe. Next up, also from SNK, I was happy when it got a remaster release, The Last Blade 2. If you play games like Samurai Showdown, then you're going to know more or less what to expect from Last Blade 2, though I actually think it took a lot of what Sam Show did and actually added on to it. From a technical perspective, it is a superb game. Also, from just the animation style and everything, once again, another masterpiece from, of course, SNK. Another, probably one of the best looking 2D fighters, in my opinion, of all time. I definitely hold it high up there in regard. Next, we have, again from SNK, Art of Fighting Anthology. Collection of the series, you get 3 classic games, Art of Fighting 1, 2, and The Path of the Warrior 3. Which is another series known definitely for its high difficulty curve, especially with individuals like Mr. Karate, as well as other characters. Just know that, though, again, also, it's a good looking game as well. Next up, we have Panzer Dragoon Remake, which is pretty awesome, and I was happy that it managed to get a Sony release. And personally, I really like the cover art as well. Next up, probably one of the most interesting in the collection is After Party. A very unique experience of indie developed games. Also, I like the way it uses the colors like purple and black and stuff in the animation and like designs and everything. It's just unique and very different from many other indie games out there. And in this day and age, so many indie games feel the same. There's so many roguelikes or side-scrolling games that you definitely have to do something to set yourself apart. And I think this game actually does set itself apart from many other indie games out there. Also, probably one of the most unique games, to say the least, is Roomba First Blood, where you basically play as, of course, a Roomba or whatever, a robot vacuum cleaner, and you're trying to stop criminals from stealing stuff. So basically, your job is to protect the house and everything. It's kind of funny, a killing robotic vacuum cleaner. Well, that is definitely unique, as it says also this is supposed to take place on Christmas Eve. So I guess you could say like it's a robotic vacuum cleaner version of Home Alone, except the goal is to actually kill the enemy rather than just injure him and have the police catch him, like in Home Alone with the Wet Bandits. Definitely one of the most unique games that I have gone from Limited Run by far. But I actually like it. Definitely has a certain charm to the play, and sometime I might do a recorded playthrough of the game and let y'all see exactly how different it is from many other games. Next up is just a remaster, of course, but as I've mentioned before, one of my personal, probably top 5 favorite Star Wars games of all time. Republic Commando, easily one of the best first-person shooters, one of my personal favorite shooter games of all time as well. The story is great, everything, and I've always been a big fan of the Clone Wars era. The Clone Troopers, you name it, it's awesome. The gameplay is great. I hold it up there very highly with like Halo 1 and 2 in quality. Next up we have, if you're a fan of Star Wars, like Star Wars Pod Racing, this is actually a game I highly recommend checking out. And the funny thing is it also has a story mode as well, which makes it a little different. Yeah, it's got simplistic graphics as you see. It actually looks like, though, a game I could picture on the Super Nintendo, except some of the graphics are actually a bit smoother, as you see, like right here. But with the colors and everything, it is quite vibrant. And overall, and it has up to a 4-player mode, just like Star Wars, which makes it cool. And yeah, as you see, they're 3D games, so you can even use 3D effect and stuff, which is kind of cool. And definitely one of the more interesting games I've picked up through Limited. Next up, we have, of course, again, Bit Trip, as I've already said. Love this game. And I will continue talking about this game for many years to come. Bit Runner is my personal favorite of the series of games, personally. But it really harkens back to, like, the NES era of gaming. Next up, arguably, easily one of my favorites, as I've already mentioned before. In my opinion, this is one of the most underrated games easily of the 8th generation. Like, it is a true 2D horror game masterpiece. I mean, a lot of people don't think it's possible to have a great, creepy 2D survival horror game. Well, this game would like to challenge you on that aspect. It is like the equivalent in some respects. It's like a 2D version of Silent Hill. At least from where I'm looking anyways. But this is a game I will stand on this hill and die on this hill that I think this is one of the best horror games of all time. Also, I absolutely love the cover art. It's great. It really gets the creepiness factor across. Next is a really cool, interesting game, which also included a soundtrack with the bundle. This was a limited, though, version with only 1,500 copies made available. This is a great game, though. A great indie scrolling game, but it's not like your traditional. As for the most part, you're using this, like, special, like, tractor, I guess you could say, with cells. It's definitely very different from many other side-scrolling games of the type, and I like that it has something refreshing to it. I like the animation style as well, and just the world. And I know they're supposed to be doing a second game, which is actually something I'm gonna look forward to. Next, we have one of these, like, stop-motion, like, video type of games. Very much this is in the same vein as games like Plumbers Don't Wear Ties, which is a really dumb game but hilarious at the same time. Also, you have, of course, also one of the all-time classics, Night Trap. But this is a really interesting and really unique experience, in my opinion. As you see, it's a 6, basically, TV anthology style episodes. It's very different, very unique. If you'd like me to ever do a actual, well, attempt playthrough, because they actually can be quite hard. But let me know if you'd like me to do a video sometime on this, because I'm sure not too many people have done videos on this unique game. Next up, another interesting limited release. This is a rather simplistic game. You basically just fly around and that's it. And there's literally like 5 or 6 games in this series. And they're all basically the same, just different, like, places you're traveling. And a lot of, like, the gameplay feels like something from another game I've played called Air Memory of Old. But it's definitely interesting if you're looking for something very peaceful with no combat or some, just some to unwind to, like, similar to that of something like Journey. This is actually some maybe a check out. Still, it's a pretty cool, definitely experience, and I am glad that I did pick up the physical. Do I think it's really worth the price? Unfortunately, not really as a whole for the game. Next, we have definitely a interesting game to say the least, Phantom Breaker Omnia, which is a game I am actually happy I got. It was a little pricier, unfortunately, than many other limited run games, but it does include quite a bit of content for the most part, including like DLC characters on disc, which is great. And eventually I do plan on doing a playthrough of like the story mode and uploading it just like with games like DNF Duel as well. Stay tuned for that in the future. But definitely an interesting game. So far from what I've played, the combat is actually pretty fun. It reminds me of Under Night and Birth a little bit. Not quite at the same levels of complexity in the mechanics, but still, it's pretty fun, and I will say I do think it's a lot better and more fun than Melty Blood. Next up, some games that were released technically made by others, but it was released in a partnership deal. First, we have sort of like a jump scare type horror game, but it's a family-friendly one, as you see, 13 and up, Among the Sleep. Definitely an interesting game, to say the least. It's not your traditional, basically, the kid's imagination gets the best of him, is the best way to describe the game. Next up, we have another pretty cool, like, horror game that was released through, and it was pretty cheap because I think when I got this, like, physical, believe it or not, this was like $19.99, so very affordable. Actually, Among the Sleep, I think, was the same price. But yeah, it's very... Plus, you even get, like, a digital comic book download code and stuff also included with this for the story and everything, which is kind of cool. And I do recommend checking out Those Who Remain. Also, of course, the physical remaster version of King of Fighters 2002. I kind of wish now, looking back, that I had a pre-order instead of the collector's version. Though I still love the game, and I really like the cover artwork. I think it's definitely up there, pretty good. Arguably is considered one of the most beloved of the KOF series as a whole, and I can see why. Also, of interesting games, you have Song of Horror, which is an interesting looking game, to say the least. It's a basically investigation horror game, but it really caught my attention as the stage design and stuff of this game reminds me a lot of like old school Resident Evil games and stuff. That's one of the things that caught my attention in the first place of the game. The last of the normal stuff, you have Martha is Dead, which also includes at least a free PS5 upgrade version of the game. It's more a walking sim game than anything, but with elements of horror. But still, I have not yet played it, so I can't vouch overall how the story is, but I plan on doing a first-time playthrough and record it, so you'll get my first gut reactions on the game as a whole. Now the last few things, like special stuff, we have this, which technically was a partner release thing. It includes like some stuff like art book, like CD and stuff like that, and like keychain and stuff like that as well, as you see, plus special DLC content as well. I do appreciate at least it did a 2-disc with 58 tracks of music and stuff, so that's very much appreciated. This is a series I actually like. It's a really fun hack and slash series. Next we have, sadly not the best overall cover art, but whatever, Castlevania Requiem, which includes, of course, a certain game that didn't get a traditional normal release here in the West, along with Symphony of the Night. if you're a Castlevania fan, you would definitely appreciate this collection, as it has two great games in my opinion, one of them being a true masterpiece. Next up, one of the things also got with my PS4 version of Panzer Dragoon was this, an actual reproduction style Sega Saturn case, which honestly is just really cool, and I really appreciate that, and using different artwork also on the cover. And then we have these two special collector's versions, my personal favorite KOF game of all time, 2000, along with the Orochi collection, which of course includes 94, 95, 96, 97, and 98. But with that said, and last are two games I have not yet done in pickups. A style of game that harkens back to like PS1 era platformers. Definitely has, to understand, some mechanic issues, but definitely looks like some from PS1 in 64 era, which is actually kind of cool. And last is this, a interesting limited release 2D RPG. And yeah, as you see, it's kind of like a furry and heavily influenced game, but the artwork and everything in the game, the world design is great, and the music is also great. So I definitely recommend checking out the game. Get a chance, but with that said, I'll see y'all next time. Same YouTube time, same YouTube channel. Stay safe out there in YouTube land.